the American dream is dead, and FINRA and the SEC killed it. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, that's literally what got me involved in politics. I got involved with politics because I looked at all these draconian and crazy laws that have been on the books since the Securities Act of 33, 34, 40. That's a long time ago. That was before Google. That was a long time ago. Things have changed dramatically. But let me show you how crazy this whole world is. I'm going to pick on you, Charlotte. Charlotte, if you and I were in Times Square and we came up with an idea, a great idea, a new fork, it's going to revolutionize how people eat. And we stood up and screamed at the top of our lungs, hey, everybody, listen up. We're going to revolutionize how people eat. We're going to do it. We've got a new fork. We need some money. Who's with us? We could go to jail. We just did a general solicitation. We don't know if everyone around us is an accredited investor, unlike this room. But for that, we didn't have an offering memorandum. We didn't have any risk factors, disclosures, or anything. It's crazy. That's the American dream. You should come up with an idea and get anyone you want. They should part with their hard-earned money however they want to. And that's what got me into politics. So I grew up as in a very staunch conservative Republican household. I was confused. I didn't know that back then. But what really got me going was this. When I moved to the West Coast, I first moved to San Diego. When I got to San Diego, no offense to anyone in California, I knew I wasn't going to plant roots. But then I found Las Vegas, and I've been there for over 20 some odd years, and I love it. And when I got there, I had just sold a company. And when I sold that company, as most of you who have exited from deals, you need some tax write-offs. And when you need tax write-offs and you're political, what do? You find 501c3s that matter, kind of like principle of business. You find the ones that mean something to you that is actually going to go out and affect real change. And so I reached out to the Republican Party in Clark County in Nevada, nothing. I reached out to the state party, nothing. I called my friends at the RNC that I knew back in New York, nothing. I sent faxes, emails, I left notes, I am a large donor, please call me, nothing. And so then I figured, maybe I lived a sheltered life. Maybe there's more than just Republicans and Democrats. So then I went online and I searched political parties. Green Party? Absolutely not. I went to school in Vermont. We know what that's about. Then I found the Libertarian Party. And I was like, oh my God, this is me. I got goosebumps. I'm getting them right now thinking about it. This is exactly how I feel. And then I made the crucial mistake of going to my first Libertarian Party meeting. I don't want to get into the details, but the long story short, it was not impressive. I showed up actually better dressed than I am now because I wouldn't wear this back then, but I was suited up. I brought my dad. That's what you do when you go to political events in New York. You get suited up. And this looked like, these guys just got done mowing the lawn and there's no one serious in this group whatsoever. And I didn't see anything that was really that important. But I still wanted to do something because, again, I love capitalism. I love the free markets. I think that that is the ultimate system. And the problem that we're running into now, and I'm sure most people in this room are running into this now more so than ever, is that capitalism has like this bad stigma to it. It shouldn't. Of course there's going to be bad capitalists. You think about and again, when you're arguing with your friends on the left, and they would want to start talking about words like socialism and Marxism and stuff of that nature, they don't really fully understand what that means. If they did, they wouldn't be talking anything but capitalism. Talk to people who have been under the communist rule. I've got some news for you. They don't want that at all. So anyway, but with that said, I think that what we needed to do was get the good side of capitalism out there, not the stuff that happened, during the Industrial Revolution and where people were truly taking advantage. It's 2024. I think now that the onus is not just on the entrepreneur or the executives to do the right thing. Of course it is. But it's your guys' job too as consumers. You get to determine winners and losers, not government. We don't want that. That's dangerous. I think we can all agree with that. So in this case, how can we get capitalism moving forward? So I did join the Libertarian Party. I got past the first meeting and I got all in, like all in. And I had a lot of people along the way that helped me, and I rose to the Libertarian National Committee pretty quick. I served 3 terms there, 2 terms of the Libertarian Party chair in Nevada. I've worked with organizations like the Leadership Institute, State Policy Network, Nevada State Policy Research Institute, et cetera. And the whole reason I did that was because I wanted to advance capitalism. I wanted capitalism to be viewed through the real definition, through our definition, not somebody else's definition. And so I think what we're doing now and with the principle of business, and I think it's crazy, people, that we have to have an entire conference dedicated in 2024 in America to promote capitalism. Come on. What are we doing wrong? Just have to slap some people around? I don't know. We don't use force, but maybe we should. I don't know. But anyway, but when you see an event like this, Alexander, you're doing a great job. You got to get behind this. And when you get done with this event, what I want you guys to do is tell everyone you know. Tell them about your experience. Tell them about the conversations that you had, the people that you met, the companies that you've seen. Because that's the stuff that's going to get people really thinking about, okay, maybe capitalism isn't that bad. And I'll tell you, I've turned one of my best friends, Big Mike, I turned him, who's a bleeding heart liberal, to at least get open to the idea that not all capitalism is bad, mostly because of some of the talks that Alexander, that you've done, and things that have come through this network. So I applaud every single one of you for being here. So give yourselves a big round of applause. Do you guys remember books? Like books? Well, there's a gentleman here who has a book called Inflation, and he's going to be available to do some signatures after the fact. But it's a huge honor for me to be able to introduce Steve Forbes. Steve Forbes is chairman and editor-in-chief of Forbes Media. He's known as a very staunch free market, free capitalist, and limited government guy. Thank you for all you do. Let's welcome him, Steve Forbes.
Wow, with an introduction like that, I feel like just go sit down. The energy there would fill up the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and free of charge. And I want to thank also Alexander and your team for what you've done. Also Rob Chatfield, who's here from Is It and Free to Choose. He and his team, Stella and others, made our visit here possible. Two things I want to hit today. First of all, the great lead-in by Brett about capitalism. The problem about talking about capitalism is very simple, and that is it's a concept that people don't grasp immediately. It's said, oh, what a free market, what are you talking about? And one of the things we should have learned, even going back to the Bible, is the way you get points across is with stories, real life stories. And so what we came up with the idea with my I have two partners on the book. They're here, Elizabeth Ames and Nathan Lewis. But in terms of Steve Forbes on achievement, we thought what we'd do is do short videos, 3-minute biographies of people who are largely forgotten but who created the modern world. And so we have these short, insightful biographies of people who did real things, but we also embed in it free market lessons in a way in which it comes to life because you're seeing a real person come to life. And that way, it gets the point across. And the amazing thing about Is It is it's kind of a strange name, but you can tell it didn't come from the government, or maybe it did, but protest to the government. But anyway, Is It, I-Z-Z-I-T. The amazing thing they've done over the years is they've made relationships with hundreds of thousands of educators and millions of students over the years around the country, getting materials in, doing the hardcore proselytizing in a way in which we hope is very effective. So in terms of the series itself, there are a lot of lessons to be learned for it. We've done 22 individuals. We're going to be doing more. All of them have left the world, so don't come up to me and say, can I be in it, unless you plan to do something to yourself. But we wanted stories of people who have, we know the whole story. So we won't go out and say, oh God, this guy got arrested for whatever. No, we know the whole story. So in terms of what we've done is take these individuals, what comes across with these individuals is the various backgrounds they come from. They range from Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, very, very rich back in the late 1800s, the early 1900s. She was no socialite. She became a great sculptor. You go to Washington, look at the Titanic Memorial, and you'll see that was her creation. She's done these works all around the world. She also founded the Whitney Museum for American Art. Came about because she was a great art collector. She went to the Metropolitan in the late 1920s and said, I'll give you these hundreds of great paintings, and I'll pay for the addition for the space for them. The Metropolitan said at the time, we don't do American art. So she went out and founded the Whitney Museum for American Art. She also founded a hospital, a field hospital in France during World War I, served 2 years as nurses, who out of her own pocket paid for 24 surgeons, many nurses to go over there to help wounded soldiers and the like, so a real doer. Very, very great background. But also then you take Annie Malone. Annie Malone was the first African-American woman millionaire in this country. Today she'd be a billionaire. A couple of things remarkable about her. One is in a free enterprise system, in a system where you have hierarchies and structures and all that kind of thing, she never would have gone nowhere. She was a daughter of parents who had just been freed from slavery, but she had an interest amazingly in chemistry. So in kitchens and everything, she doodled around and ended up creating great hair products that she ended up selling around the country, became a millionaire. And the thing is, she achieved great personal success serving an underserved community, African-American community, at a time when racism was raw and rough, and women weren't even allowed to vote. And the way she did it was also selling through agents. Long before Avon and others came along, she had 75,000 agents selling her products here and around the world, the Philippines and elsewhere. Owned a whole block in Chicago where she had her college. And this is another thing about these entrepreneurs, is creating a culture. She had if you're an agent for her, you had to do certain things a certain way. So it's not just going out and selling, it's creating a culture where people feel they're part of something, they want to be not only improve themselves, but also have values that they believe in. And one of the lessons from her is she not only did well for herself, her company did well, but also those 75,000 agents did well, selling, getting a real income, but also learning how to interact with other people, getting skills that could apply not just for working for her, but if they wanted to go elsewhere, they were head of other people because they had that kind of experience and background. Another thing that comes across from this series is that people can take existing products and revolutionize them. Of course, the classic case is George Eastman. Photography back in the late 1800s was very cumbersome. You had to set up a tent and everything, chemicals and everything. And over a period of years, after setbacks, he created cameras that every working person could afford. Pennies, dollars, have the film, have it developed. So tens of millions of people, not just a handful of hobbyists, could do photography. And also learning about, with a guy like Eastman, setbacks. In an early part of his career in perfecting this photography, he had to use chemical plates. And one day the plates didn't work, and he's wondering what's gone wrong, and he faced bankruptcy. So on his own, he went to Europe and went to the fellow the company that made these, part of the ingredients for this plate, and found out they had changed the substance, which wrecked the whole plates. So it's not an easy path, but taking something existing and improving it. Another example is Clarence Saunders. And when you go to a store today, you think of nothing going down an aisle. If you're honest, you'll take items off and pay for them. But before he came along in retailing, you'd go to a store, grocery store or whatever, you would go up to a clerk behind a counter and give the clerk a list of what you wanted. And so they'd take it off the shelf and you would pay for it and go away. In a seemingly simple concept, he came up with the idea, why not do away with that? You come in the store and you pick the items off the shelf yourself. Never been done before. He invented the modern supermarket. He also wanted to give it a lively name, so he called it Piggly Wiggly. And it started, and so it started in 1916 in Memphis, Tennessee. But again, taking something seemingly simple, the retailing's been around forever, since cave days, and revolutionizing it in a way we say, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal was it had never been done before that way. But thinking about the consumer, making it easier for people. Also, you need, too, persistence. Norman Borlaug, we highlight, the man who created the Green Revolution, literally saved 1 billion people from starvation. But in coming up with the seeds that would enable these wheat crops and other crops last and proliferate, he went through 2,000 different varieties of genetic engineering, trying to make things that could work. And in a period of time, finally achieved success in Mexico, turned Mexico from a wheat importer to a wheat exporter, went to India and Pakistan, met initially great resistance, but got through, and so he's credited with saving the lives of 1 billion people because the famines that were normal in those parts of the world ceased with what his persistence did. And then too, one of the things that can happen is it can be very personal. It can be very personal. For example, there was a woman named Margaret Rudkin. Back in the 1930s, one of her kids had health problems. One of the things the kid could not eat was processed bread. And so she decided, she heard about a wheat, maybe do something. So she made a bread. First loaves were like rocks, but eventually a bread, she invented modern whole wheat bread through various recipes, developing recipes. The doctor was impressed. He said they want to tell other physicians, so she ended up in the bread business. And she decided to name it after where she lived, which was Pepperidge Farm. And then going to Europe, she went to Europe and found this great chocolate formula. So hence we got cookies like Milano and Brussels and the like. A trip to Switzerland gave us goldfish crackers, which no parent could live without. Goldfish crackers. But again, it's a personal problem, but turning it into something. Then another thing that gets overlooked, and this is a wonderful thing about entrepreneurship and free markets and capitalism, is somebody can invent something, but it doesn't mean it's going to be used. It's amazing. You know, in the late 70s, PCs came along, but initially people wondered, what do we use these for? You know, great machine, but do we put our recipes on it, keep track of the recipe? You know, but eventually it became something that is absolutely indispensable. A good example of taking something was radio. The miracle of radio, 10 years ago, people found it astounding that you could take voices and put them in the air without wires, not just the signals, but voices. But in the early 20s, when radio came along, voice radio came along, what do you use it for? You use it a community board or something? What do you use this thing for? A fellow named David Sarnoff came up with the idea of doing live broadcasts of live events. His superiors at the time thought, oh, this won't work, but he persuaded them to do a broadcast of a big heavyweight boxing match, Carpentier and Dempsey, and hundreds of thousands, even though the reception was not great, hundreds of thousands of people tuned in, and he invented network radio and then network television. Again, taking something but finding a use for it. It's not enough to invent it. And that's why when people say, oh, this society invented this, this society invented that, they don't realize without free enterprise capitalism, it's just going to say curiosity and not much used. Where in a free enterprise system, it is constantly revised, produced, the learning curve, and becomes better and better. But you only get that in a free enterprise system. And then two, in terms of, I mentioned corporate culture with Annie Malone. Another example was a fellow named Fred Harvey, who came over here and really invented the first chains of restaurants along railroad tracks. Restaurants along railroad tracks in the 1800s was slop, terrible. We explained that in the short video. And he came to the idea of why not have great food, and the waitresses, he had, again, a code of conduct, how you would treat customers and the like. And that became eventually a part of a movie with Judy Garland called The Harvey Girls. But again, creating that culture where people feel they have something and can be part of something. So whether it's inventing something, taking something that's there and improving it, like retailing or photography, whether it's constantly inventing, finding something, a use for something new, all of these come together. And that's what's so wonderful about capitalism, is that it's not that people are perfect. Brett's point, the point is in terms of capitalism is the raps against capitalism are usually raps against human nature. People do bad things, but I have a revelation for you. People were doing bad things before Adam Smith. You know, just read some history. Read some history. But you want a system that takes our energies, which can be used for good or for evil, and direct them in ways you don't even know, to a higher purpose. You may not love your neighbor, but you sure want to sell to your neighbor. And so you figure out, how do I appeal to you? How do I get Brett to buy this subscription to Forbes? And so I want to get to know Brett here. How do I persuade you? So I want to get to know you. And so it actually increases humanity. And this gets to something that was mentioned. We have a book here, Inflation, What It Is, Why It's Bad, and How to Fix It. And the thing is about free enterprise is you need an environment where these things can flourish. These attributes can flourish. People, regardless of the background, can do amazing things from so many different angles. And the thing about inflation, it destroys social trust. Money makes it possible for total strangers to come together and buy and sell with each other. I don't have to know bread at all, but we can do a sophisticated transaction together if we have a trustworthy money. Money measures value. That's what it does, measures value the way a scale measures weight, or a ruler measures space, or a clock measures time. And so you want money that has a steady value, not something that fluctuates all over. Just for a moment, imagine if the Federal Reserve was in charge of the Time Bureau and they decided to float the clock. and so you have 60 minutes one day, 80 minutes the next. You know, imagine in that kind of environment baking a cake. It says bake the batter 30 minutes. You have to figure out, are those nominal minutes? Are those inflation-adjusted minutes? Are those New York minutes? It just makes it a lot more difficult. And so in terms of inflation, let me just hit a couple of things because we're fast running out of time. I'm over time, but they are too polite to pull me off. Two kinds of inflation, non-monetary and monetary. Non-monetary inflation comes when you get disruptions to production from a natural disaster, a war, or the lockdowns that we have, sends prices up because the supply chains have all been disrupted. And the way you cure that is let the economy recover, which this crowd won't let it happen. But normally, if you let the economy alone, it will recover from those kinds of disasters. And you saw after World War II, U.S. went from a wartime to a peacetime economy, but you don't go from making tanks to refrigerators overnight. So for a couple of years, it was a very, very difficult period. You know, prices went up, controls came off, but we got through it. And so in terms of monetary inflation, and this is where the Federal Reserve doesn't get it, monetary inflation is simply reducing the value of a currency, usually by creating too much of it. And so what we see and the big mistake the Federal Reserve and every central banker is making is they assume the way you cure inflation is by reducing economic activity, creating more unemployment. And so that's why you get this nonsense discourse. Oh, is the Fed going to ease up too soon and the economy will come back again? Prosperity does not cause inflation. Rising prices is a symptom, a result of inflation, not the cause. And so you have this nonsense of the Fed, they call it the Phillips curve, the trade-off between inflation and unemployment. If we depress the economy, yeah, that'll bring prices down because people won't be able to buy anything. But the cure is simple. Create a stable value for the dollar. We go in the book of the various ways that can be done. But if they just get away from this idea that prosperity causes inflation, let me close with one thing, and that is the economy someday will do well again. And then you start to see the Federal Reserve talking about, is it overheating? Is the economy getting too prosperous? They do this. These are grown-ups, supposedly. They have PhDs. So just ask yourself, if you get a pay raise, do you get sweaty at night? Do you feel you're getting overheated? Do you say, take it away, my sheets are all sweaty. It's nuts. So again, Alexander, thank you for what your team has done. Rob, what Izzet has done, and come and buy the book, but also go on izzet.org, izzit.org, and we have cards that can help you out on your chair about what we're doing, getting points across by stories of real people doing real things. That turns people on. Thank you.